Greetings and welcome. My name is Kent Ono, and I'm the immediate past president of the National Communication Association and professor of communication at the University of Utah. I appreciate you being here with us today for what promises to be an illuminating and eye-opening workshop. Before we get started, I want to say just a few words about the Zoom environment. You are welcome to comment in either the chat section or the Q&A section. And panelists will respond to any of the questions that you ask in that section. Only panelists will be visible during this webinar, and they'll be the only people able to be heard as well. But the panelists can respond to either the chat or the Q&A live during the session. We may not be able to respond to all of the chat section comments, but we'll do our best. This workshop is being recorded and live tweeted. And while we will try to avoid any words that might be trigger words, if you are sensitive to any words, please let us know. And also, obviously, if you need to leave because words like violence or racism are mentioned, we encourage you to be safe. The recording will be available on both AEJMC and NCA websites once it can be posted. And if there are any journalists in the audience, we do encourage you to write stories about this webinar if you wish. And we're happy to participate in any conversations afterwards should you need to do interviews to write the stories. This workshop is the result of an important collaboration between the National Communication Association and the Association for Education in Journalism and Mass Communication. A collaboration we hope will inspire more collaborations and greater cooperation and engagement among professional communication organizations. The AEJMC conference is happening right now. So if you like what you hear on this panel, be sure to find out more at the conference. There are so many people I'd like to thank for having helped make this day and this event possible. On behalf of the panel, I'd like to start by mentioning just a few. Deb Eichut, Wendy Fernando, Amanda Caldwell, who is our technical moderator today, Linda Tolliver, and Amanda Derrick. Unfortunately, this workshop came about as a response to rampant anti-Asian violence throughout the nation and beyond. Following political rhetoric that inflamed racial tensions by putting the entire blame for COVID-19 and the resulting pandemic and health crisis on China, painful, violent attacks on people of Asian descent, the elderly, ordinary people living their lives, children, and especially women, have taken place. This political association of Asian people with disease and this yellow peril discourse and violence are by no means new within US history and Western history more generally. While national media have stopped covering this daily violence for the most part, such attacks appear daily in local news venues, both physical and verbal, physically harmful and degrading and demoralizing violence and discourse continue unabated. On Sunday night, for example, in Columbus Circle in Manhattan, a woman reportedly spit in an Asian woman's face and called her racist names. On Friday of this last week, after asking her ethnicity, a man allegedly hit and pinned a Korean woman between a car door and her car frame, and then tried to rob her. Last week, Delaware State Representative Gerald Brady sent an email message containing a racial slur referring to a Chinese woman from his official legislative account. Subsequent to that, people have asked for his resignation. Following the horrific attack in Atlanta, where 8 people died and where Asian women were named as the primary target, we witnessed haphazard media coverage and racist, sexist, dismissive, and deplorable statements given by state officials charged with investigating the crime and reporting the crime to the public. It became clear to many of us at that moment, if it wasn't clear to us before, that so many in media are not prepared to cover stories about Asian and Asian American people. They do not have the training, expertise, experience, or knowledge to effectively cover events concerning Asian and Asian American people. Additionally, media organizations do not know how to keep an ongoing story about anti-Asian violence and attacks fresh and live in this 24-hour news cycle that we have, despite the fact that this violence and this discourse continues. It is for these reasons and many more that we organize this panel to help journalists and scholars think through ways to improve media coverage about Asian and Asian American people. Assembled here are active journalists who have spoken courageously, consistently, and expertly about anti-Asian violence. But before I introduce our panelists and ask them a series of questions, ask them questions attendees sent to us ahead of time, thank you very much, and ask them questions that you pose in the Q&A section of this Zoominar, let me now introduce the presidents of our two professional associations who we're very, very happy to have with us today. They would like to say just a few words to get things going. To start things off, I'll ask Tim P. Voss, president of AEJMC and director of the School of Journalism at Michigan State University, to say just a few words.
Thanks, Kent. Collaboration between AEJMC and NCA has been fairly rare in the recent past, so we're really pleased to be able to work together. It's also a testament to how important we think this topic is. There could have been 1,000 reasons or opportunities for our two organizations to say, hey, let's get together and magnify our voice and make an impact. But it was this concern covering anti-Asian violence that brought us together. So we hope this workshop proves useful and makes a difference. We don't want this to be a one-off. As long as this problem exists, we need to continue to work on this, and we at AEJMC will. Yeah.
You're on mute, Kent.
Thank you very much, Tim. Next, we have David McMahon, president of NCA. David, it's really wonderful to have you with us here today. If you might say a few words.
Thanks, Ken. Well, on behalf of the National Communication Association, I want to extend my welcome to everyone here today and extend my appreciation for the panelists and those who worked so hard to bring this important workshop together. You know, violence against Asians and Asian Americans has a long history and continues, yet coverage has been historically minimal, and recent increase in coverage seems to have abated. Accordingly, this workshop, as Tim mentioned, is especially necessary and imperative. So I'm excited about the opportunity to partner with AEJMC and hope this is the start of many collaborative efforts. So once again, thank you all for being here, and thank you to those sharing their insight and expertise today.
Thank you, David. Okay, so next I'd like to introduce the panelists, and if you wouldn't mind, panelists, just wave to start. And the panelists are going to be the ones who say the most during this workshop. But I'm very excited to have three fantastic writers, three fantastic journalists who've been doing a lot to generate interest and information about anti-Asian violence. Erica Lee is an incoming reporter for KWTV News 9 in Oklahoma City. She's covered breaking news features and stories that impact the local community and is an active member of the Asian American Journalists Association. Diana Liu is a writer, media critic, and scientist in Boston, Massachusetts. Welcome, Diana. Marianne Zhou is a Chinese American journalist based in New York. She graduated from Columbia Journalism School and is currently a reporter at Nikkei Asia. So thank you very much, panelists. Thank you for taking the time to be with us and for sharing your words of wisdom. So let me begin with the questions that we kind of generated amongst all of the people who helped put this together. And I'm going to ask each panelist to go in turn. Perhaps we could go in the order of Erica, then Diana, then Marianne, and for these first questions. So question one, what advice would you give someone who has never covered Asian Americans as part of a story?
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here. My name is Erica. And I think this is a really good question because a lot of people, they don't know how to go about it, and that's okay. I think the most important part is to be transparent about what you know and what you don't know. For example, in my old newsroom in Idaho, I had a really seasoned news anchor ask me, what does AAPI stand for? And what does the PI stand for? And like, what does that mean? And I said, that stands for Pacific Islander. And she was like, what is the difference? And, it just because you're a seasoned news anchor or, a journalist for a really long time doesn't mean you're not open to learning new things. So I think just asking questions and making sure all the facts are correct and not being embarrassed about it or not being shy about it is really, really important for someone who has never covered Asian Americans before. And of course, also, asking Asian Americans themselves what they think about what you're covering and if they think that what you're saying and what you're doing is factually correct and if that's sensitive to the group of people that you're covering as well. And yeah, I think that there's so many ways to go about this, but it's the most sensitive way is to do these things. And of course, make sure the language that you use, example, like pronouncing the names, double check, triple check that you're saying them in the right way. And I feel like that really helps with the respect part of covering Asian Americans.
That was great. And also thanks for inviting me, everyone. It's great to be here. Yeah, so I feel like that question just kind of implies that whoever is covering the story doesn't really have Asian people, Asian Americans in their lives, period. So I think for me, the first part would be like to say, okay, what is the community that I'm covering? And like who is in there, and to actually just go talk to those people. Like before you have to cover a story, because like if a crime happens and then you're like, oh no, I don't have any experience with this, that's like somebody going and trying to do open heart surgery after somebody has a heart attack with no experience in heart surgery. Like, why would anybody do that? So like, if you're covering a community, like find out who the people are and go talk to them, because even if you're talking to another reporter and asking them questions, they might not know, because all Asians are trained in learning about all Asian things. Like I, as a scientist, if I walked into a lab and asked a bunch of my Asian colleagues what the PI and AAPI stands for, they might not know. Like, why are Asian reporters the ones that are responsible for educating their reporter colleagues? Do the research, go talk to the people who you're supposed to be covering, and like preempt the panic that comes from not having a clue. I would also say that a lot of times people will talk to their friends and colleagues, but that's missing a huge swath of whatever community you might be covering, because a lot of the violence is happening in Asian enclaves. Not all Asian enclaves are the same. There's ethnic enclaves within like the greater AAPI community. So like find out who you need to cover and figure out a way to engage with people who might be a different class, a different ethnicity, and live in a different place than you.
Hi.
Yeah, I think both Eric and Diana made great points. So I'd like to add that I think the first thing for somebody who never covered Asian American, because we hear the term Asian American all the times on TV nowadays, but you need to realize it's more like a blanket term. There are so many, I think you can assume there will always be more nuances that we don't know about than things that we think we understand. Because, you know, so many different ethnic groups with different country origins and completely different, they have completely different experiences. And there are also major differences and perspectives between generations, you know, social economic classes. So there are just so many things you need to learn, and also religions and many more things. So I think there's just, I think you can assume you're going into some type of a rabbit hole that you cannot just do one story or two story and think, oh, I know all about Asian Americans now. So I think that's one thing. And another thing is that language barrier. A lot of Asian Americans, especially the elderly, speak their mother tongue more than English. So if you're somebody who doesn't speak the language that you're reporting on, it will be really difficult. And I think, you know, if you're reporting through translators, you can only scratch the surface. So if a newsroom wants to cover Asian Americans, I would highly suggest either you partnered up with like an Asian American colleague, or you just hire more Asian American reporters. So yeah, I think that's my 2 cents. I think that would really benefit the communities.
Thank you very much. Those are great responses, and thanks for kicking it off with such wonderful ideas. Also, thanks to those in the chat who are contributing. We appreciate it. The second question that we have is, what should journalists know to do a good job of covering anti-Asian violence specifically?
Hi, yeah, I think that question and a lot of the answers are really similar to what we all said about the first question, because knowing how to cover it for someone who doesn't cover it and the ways that you do it is kind of representative of how good of a job that you're doing. But, you know, just to reiterate, I think that as Diana mentioned as well, knowing that when you're covering Asian Americans, there's so many different groups of Asian Americans. So for example, people historically and generally use East Asians as the main example of how Asian Americans feel about things or react to things, but there are also so many different other types, like there's South Asians and, you know, Pacific Islanders. Like, I just feel like you have to be able to know what group that you're talking about. And I just want to take a second to also answer one of the Q&A questions from Terry. What would be a good way to bring it to attention to those who are ignorant or disinterested in this topic population at all? I think kind of just keeping up on current events and tying them to what's going on. For example, like Illinois became the first state to require Asian American history this month in the curriculum. So maybe bringing something like, hey, did you know, like, that's something that happened and this is why. And then so you don't always have to be like, oh my God, like everyone, the Asian Americans are being attacked. There's so many other ways to bring about that information, or when people are celebrating Asian American heritage or things like that, you can bring that up as well and tie that in together. So it doesn't have to be always super heavy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, those are great points. I think I heard that like brown Asians, they're also experiencing a spike in violent attacks due to Islamophobia, because apparently just when things are bad, like people just start attacking everybody, you know, like, and I think it's like the 20th anniversary of 9/11 or something. So there was a spike there because of that. And that's also getting unreported. And it's also not even, a lot of times people don't even count that as Asian American violence, and it most definitely is. So, you know, like keeping in mind that diversity too. And I also feel like just like posing the question is like, how do you report Asian violence as like a separate category from violence against another human being? You know, that's like also a frame shift that I think probably needs to happen with a lot of people, because like how would you report violence happening to a white person? You know, like literally just go and look at a violent like a report about, you know, a young white woman who was attacked or something, and just word for word repeat that, but for somebody whose name is like Min Young Lee, just humanize them, you know. Like a lot of the people that I talk to, the thing that they don't like the most about how the reports of the Atlanta murders happened, how that was reported, was that it focused so much on the murder and the murder's perspective and completely dehumanized the victims, didn't say anything about them. You know, the reporters, they didn't talk to any of the Korean victims or their families or their colleagues or the witnesses that were there, even though they had a lot to say. And there was Korean language reports at the time that had a lot more substance than about the victims and who they were than the English language ones. So I would say start with the humanity, I guess.
I think both of them made great points as before. Yeah, I think, you know, for journalists and their newsrooms, I think they need to be on the same page that there is definitely widespread anti-Asian sentiment in this country right now. Somehow that wasn't clear to some people who are even like close to these communities. It wasn't clear, or who has Asian colleagues, and they're, oh, was it a hate crime? So, you know, and the crimes had been rising since the start of the pandemic. So I think everybody needs to be very clear about that. And, you know, to all my Asian American colleagues, like kudos to you to, you know, put your foot down on this issue. And I think how to do a good job covering it, like Dinah said, the humanity is definitely very important. And I think when you're approaching the victims' families, so to understand a lot of Asian families, they might not want to attract attention. A lot of hate crimes are not reported because, you know, either they're worried about immigration status, or they're worried about, oh, I don't want the police to come to me. There could be many reasons, but just understand they might not be so like coming forward when you know, when you're asking about their experiences. So I think just be very patient and also expect a lot of rejections as well. And also just in context, when you're talking about anti-Asian crime, the historical and the cultural context, you have to include them always. You know, a lot of people might say that Asian American like activism is just like, it feels kind of sudden in this country, but it's the long time coming. You know, like the model minority label has haunted Asian Americans for decades. You know, so what we're seeing now is like this, all these feelings, the micro aggressions, and even like blatant racism acts that done to them. It just like bottled up feelings from years of things like this. So, you know, I think the anger now is very important. So I think it needs to be included in your pieces.
Excellent. I think we're going to move a little bit from you know, how people cover stories about Asian people and anti-Asian violence to your own experiences as journalists, and so kind of the more personal dimension. So what experiences have you had as a journalist that can help people understand the challenges that Asian American journalists and reporters face out there, the kind of situation that has emerged for them and for you, and how you navigate the complex waters of being an Asian American reporter?
Yeah, so most recently I was a reporter in Boise, Idaho, and I was an on-air reporter, so I was very visible. And I was the only Chinese American reporter in that entire market. And so, and also in my station as well, there were more people of color behind the scenes, but I was the only one that was front-facing. And when I was covering, you know, the anti-Asian violence, and when I was trying to pitch the story that I wanted to cover, it was often really hard to get people and managers to actually understand that this is worth covering. And the only way that I actually got people to agree for me to cover it is when I tied it to the Biden signing the anti-Asian hate crime bill and using that as like a leeway. But if he hadn't signed that, then I wouldn't have been able to tie it to like a big topic that happened. And just overall, within this past year, I've just experienced a lot of microaggressions, but not just that, sometimes just blatant words of racism. You know, I was driving and then I was changing lanes and someone was like, "You stupid Asian whore," and like, sorry if that is triggering to anyone, but anyways, like it was really, really hurtful to me because I didn't even think that that made any difference, you know, and it just really, I had to like pull over and it was really, really sad. And I don't know, I was like driving a station car too. So even like being a journalist or someone publicly like didn't protect me from, you know, experiencing these things. And I covered a lot of rallies and protests during 2020. And, you know, a lot of people would just say random stuff to me like, "Oh, wow, you're a reporter, like you can speak English," like, blah, 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 just things like that. I mean, those are more, you know, backhanded, but they're still hurtful in some ways. And when I was covering when the Atlanta shooting was happening and I was, you know, writing about that on social media and kind of just advocating for, you know, how I felt and how my community feels. I got a lot of emails and messages from people that were like, "Well, actually, you know, Asian women, they make up most of the sex workers, and if you go around Boise, Idaho, and if you go into a massage parlor, almost every single worker there is an Asian woman. So how can you explain that?" And just stuff like that to me. And I wouldn't reply, or I would be like, "Thank you for your opinion, but actually this. And then I was continually harassed online about that. So I just felt like, you know, these are the things that not a lot of people know that we experience behind the scenes. And not that I'm trying to be like, "Oh, woe is me," but I'm just saying like speaking up about it has made people more aware of that it was even happening to me. And I wrote a column about it for Shondaland, and a local newspaper in Idaho actually saw that and they reran it. And a bunch of people in Idaho were like, "Oh, we had no idea like this was even happening. We're so sorry. Sorry about that." And so, yeah, I mean, I don't want to take up too much time, but anyways, it's just sometimes it's blatant, but sometimes it's really hidden, you know, when people, you know, say you're not a culture fit, or they say that you don't get along, they don't get along with you, but they can't explain why. It's the microaggressions as well, you know, and they all contribute to it.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, I feel you so hard. But I mean, it's just like there's like a emotional labor. It's like a heavy burden, and you have to bear it by yourself because, well, look who's on the panel. It's like 3 young women, you know, like where are our mentors? There are none because the journalists who were there before, they get pushed out, you know, if they were ever there before. There's not like, you know, there's like issues with hiring and the culture fit, but there's also issues with retention and promotion. You know, like this wasn't, and that's true in every industry pretty much. And because this happened, one of my friends, she works in a finance company, and when the Atlanta murders happened, they did like a little spiel about how, oh, they support, you know, like Asians against violence. Meanwhile, they secretly fired the one VP who was Asian at that company at the same time. It's just a lot of saying that there's support, but not actually doing anything to support you. And because you don't have any mentors in the culture, you don't know how to advance. You don't know what the next steps are to get to that next level. So people don't reach that next level, and you don't have enough colleagues that you can be real with and talk about these microaggressions with, to even know that you're experiencing microaggressions or gaslighting or manipulation. So you think it's you and that you're doing something wrong when it's not you at all. Everyone feels it that are on the same level as you, but you don't get to talk about it with anybody because you're too dispersed. You know, it's not the same group. You know, you can't just say, oh dude, this happened to me, and somebody else saying, oh, that's fucked up, you know. Sorry Chris, this is why I asked what I shouldn't say. But yeah, just like a ton of that. And you know, it's like what it boils down to is a lot of toxic stress that accumulates over years. And then women of color, people of color journalists, they're more likely to get burned out and leave, or get forced out if they stay and are loud about what they want. Oh, and also in terms of what can be reported on, I think you're 100% right, Erica, that like white bosses just aren't going to care unless you tie an Asian story with a white story. But if you want to be writing about anything that goes against common beliefs, or you know, that just is might rile people up, like you will get death threats. People will say that, like, for example, if you publish a story refuting all the crazy conspiracies against China and like engineering the COVID virus, like this happened to my friend, like you will get death threats, you will get talked down to, people will accuse you of not being a real person. They'll say you're a spy or a commie, or you're a robot, you're not even a real human being, to discredit you. So it's very, very difficult to say what you really want to say because you're not supported, and you will get a lot of pushback. So it's just much easier to stick with more trite stories and to stay safe as a journalist.
I think there are challenges in the newsroom, and also, you know, with sources like Diana and Erica mentioned. So I think in the newsroom, as a colored member of the American workforce, I'm sure everybody is familiar with the term or the phrase, pick your battles. You know, you're basically counting how many strikes I have left with my white boss that I can use, you know. And I think I've saved quite a bit for this anti-Asian crime bullshit. So, you know, I think we have to push. I mean, I understand, you know, like a lot of people are worried about upsetting their editors or their bosses. I mean, but you know what, you know, this is your moment, you know, this is the battle you got to pick. So, you know, your perspective matters. So your editor might already have like an idea of what the story he or she wants it to be. And now you decide what the story you want to tell. And then you tell them that, and you push it, and you don't back down from that. And I think, you know, communities like AJA, Asian American Journalism Association, and also there's another one called Chinese Storytellers, are very great for you know, building your support system in the industry. And I've met awesome people from the two organizations. And from like outside, you know, like microaggressions, and I've had this health official, kind of like a media official from a health department from New Jersey, that when I asked her questions about medical mask supply, she didn't answer my question, but said, oh, here's our guideline in Chinese. Why don't you educate your your readers about, how they shouldn't hoard medical supplies. But the thing is, Nikkei Asia is an English publication owned by a Japanese company. So I don't know where she got the Chinese from, the Chinese audience from. And I called her back and called her out. And then you just have to constantly do that. And another thing is, for a lot of Asian Americans and Asian reporters who cover China nowadays, I cover China as well, it's very difficult to be stuck in between because, like Diana said, the American side might call you, you're just a CCP spy or something like that. And then the Chinese, who are patriots might say, oh, you're such a traitor to your race, you don't deserve to live. I've definitely got trolled by that as well. It can be very stressful. So I think it's very hard to be an Asian American reporter right now, especially if you cover, geopolitics or something like that. So again, I think it's just very important to have a solid community and a support system.
Thanks for some of the very powerful stories and advice and insights and frankness about the reality of journalism for Asian and Asian American reporters and women reporters. The next question kind of gets at how what we do as journalists relates to what we are hearing and seeing in media more broadly. So as journalists, how can stories about Asian American violence also combat the misinformation that fuels some of the violence?
I think for me, there are a lot of harmful stereotypes that are associated with Asians and specifically Asian women. There's the hypersexualization of Asian women that really contributed to the Atlanta shootings, in my opinion. For example, a lot of people think of Asian women as just kind of like sex dolls or quiet and submissive. And that really doesn't help with what's going on. And that actually is very harmful in terms of defending ourselves against what's going on, because some people, for example, the email that I said that I got where they were like, oh yeah, but all sex workers are Asian American, just stuff like that. And when you know these stereotypes, you are an Asian journalist, you're able to dispel them, because I'm pretty sure racism is just racism, and it would happen either way, whether or not she were to so I mean, I just feel like there's just a lot of things like that, and I'm sure the other panelists can speak more on that, but that's just kind of one example that I have.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't think that a lot of the reports even make that connection that you made, Ken, at the beginning, saying that the xenophobic COVID reporting is directly responsible. A lot of times they'll be like, oh, these 5 Asian houses got robbed in the last 2 weeks. So I don't know why it's just like, how did this happen? There was this New York Times report after, or maybe around the time of the Atlanta shootings, that were like, oh, there's a rise in Asian American violence. And it spoke nothing of the months and months of really racist reporting that they did themselves. So there's no check on that. And I think reporters, if you really care about this, you make those connections, and also make connections about what is happening with Asian Americans and Asian women to other groups, because it might not be very initially apparent. I was talking with my colleague who is a gay Black man, and he was really upset. He lives in the South, the deep South, and he was really upset about the Atlanta shootings. And it didn't, initially occur to me why, but he was later on, we were talking about it, And he said that the people in his neighborhood, when he talked to them about it, they would say, well, you know, if you choose that kind of lifestyle, then you get what's coming to you. You know, like inferring that these women were sex workers. And he took that really hard because that's the same kind of rationale that people who didn't give a shit about the AIDS epidemic said, you know, and that caused an entire generation of, you know, like gay men to lose their life for no reason. So, you know, just like having the insight or just like brainstorming, like, how can I tie what's happening to this group with other groups, with me, and making that personal for your readers, the majority of your readers, will really help.
Yeah, and totally 100% on both Erica and Dinah's perspectives. And I think I'll add that, you know, it's totally surfacing in recent years that, you know, how we talk about US-China relationship really is affecting the Asian American experience here. You know, Asian Americans should be, their experience are very different from Asians in nature, of course. You know, they are Americans, but because of this foreignness, because how they have been viewed historically, you know, whatever happens over there often affect how they're treated in America. We really should change that, but in the meantime, I think anybody, you know, journalists, politicians, scholars, anyone who delivers information to the public needs to be very aware of how they're framing this relationship and how they speak about the conflicts, and you know, just be mindful of it. And you know, I think I really believe that genuine actual China policy doesn't create hatred, but China bashing does. And to distinguish that, you know, I don't think a lot of politicians figure this out. And we have so many China hawks, you know, I mean, sure, you can rise on this China hating, you know, thing for your political career, but what does it do to Americans here? You know, they're not very aware of it. And I think that's very irresponsible political talks. And they, you know, we need to keep pushing them to kind of change that. And also I've kind of think that, you know, in America, we have the Trump administration, the Biden administration, and everybody know the two administrations stands for different ideas, and that no government or not one administration can ever represent the opinions of every American. But when it comes to foreign countries, when it comes to China, it's often, you know, Chinese government, entire Chinese people, and Asian Americans or even Chinese Americans, everybody's lumped in together. So why is it different when it comes to a foreign country, or when it comes to people that look different from you? So I think, you know, from the roots of this problem, we need to change how we think about it.
I think this got mentioned before, which is thinking about kind of the newsroom, and where editors and people in power in news organizations, where they're at. And this connects to a question that someone asked in the chat as well. But how can editors and journalists keep the story about anti-Asian violence fresh and newsworthy? And to add something that someone asked in the Q&A, you know, how can we keep getting stories about Asian and Asian American people out there in general? Obviously, timeliness is really important in the news business. And once you've covered something, you know, you've got to have something original to be able to create a new story, right? But at some point, then editors, publishers think the story has played itself out and there's no more that can be said. How do we change that perception, and how do we make these stories more current?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, especially since, what's happening now is just a spike of what's always been happening. And, I know people who have talked about, you know, violence against elderly Asians for years now. And just because it's become more visible now in media doesn't mean that it just started happening now. It's just because we're just now more aware. And I think keeping the dialogue going has a lot to do with what I mentioned earlier about, adding to what's timely. I mean, I know that sometimes that's not, it sounds like a cop out, but it is always the best way to tie it. Like, so for example, the Asian Americans competing in the Olympics, a lot of them, pay homage to their heritage when they're on the stage. A lot of them speak out about that. You could use that. That's really relevant right now, talking about the Olympics, and then use that to tie in and be like, hey, and this is what happened. This is what's been happening. They're using their platform to talk about AAPI. Hey, this is what happened, blah, blah, blah. Or, like I said earlier, Illinois became the first state to require Asian American curriculum in schools. And that is actually something to celebrate. You don't have to always make that about really negative about all these things that are bad happening to Asian Americans, although of course it's important. And, always keeping your ear out for the things that matter to us, because racism and violence against Asian Americans have started because so many other things have been underlying. And so always just being aware of other types of Asian American issues like the model minority myth, and keeping dialogue about that. And, there's things that happen, every year, which is like Chinese New Year and AAPI Heritage Month. Those are things that you can always plan in advance for, because there's always things to celebrate. There are always, musicians, artists, and, people visible in the media that are Asian American that you can highlight as well. So, and using that to tie in with timeliness and everything, it's often a way to keep that dialogue going, but you don't have to keep it the same.
Yeah, this question kind of bothers me because, well, I just think about the China bashing news stories, they're not new and fresh. They're the same stuff, sometimes word for word. They're the same stuff every single time. And yet that still gets play every single day. That gets play. So why do we have to convince the people with the power and the platform when we don't have the power and the platform to make things relevant? Think about that. I think about that. And I think, well, what can we actually do? Because if the people in the newsroom actually say that to their bosses, they'll get pushed out. If the other reporters who are allies back those people, those reporters up, they'll get pushed out too. Like white allies will get pushed out so fast also. So I don't even know if the answer is trying to convince these people who clearly do not care and are never going to care in the newsroom. I think that maybe the answer is to remind ourselves that we are consumers. We have other modes of getting the relevant information we need, like Twitter and WeChat and Line. And Asian Americans are the fastest growing consumer base in the US. China is a huge market. A lot of the Asian countries are huge markets now. And we can say, hey, these news outlets, these white news outlets, they don't care about us. We don't want them. We don't want to buy their stories. We don't want to support them and just continue to bash them, and they'll lose their funding. I think that's the only way, because clearly they don't care and they're not going to change.
I think what Diana said actually reminds me of the day after the Atlantic shooting. because I was talking to other Asian American colleagues working at different news organizations. And I think everybody was very sad and just hurtful that I think most of the newsrooms didn't mention anything about the Atlantic shooting. And some of their colleagues were even joking about St. Patrick's Day because, you know, the next day was St. Patrick's Day. And that just, I think a lot of us, you know, for the first time just realized how invisible a lot of us are in companies. And, you know, it kind of reminds me of that when we're talking about, you know, how do we keep it fresh and how do we keep it newsworthy? And I want to go back to the point I made earlier that we need to keep pushing. You know, I'm just throwing all my strikes out of the window by this point. You know, like people can think I'm arrogant or whatever. Shit, I'm gonna be an arrogant Asian American reporter. And, you know, I'm going to write about these things that I care about and write about Asian American stories. And to editors, I want to, you know, tell them that don't just dismiss the anti-Asian crime as just another number or old news. You know, I believe in the human angle, right? Like all the stories about the victims and basically how a lot of the families, you know, left for America and made a future here. You know, that's a very American story you can tell. That's a great immigrant story. And, you know, the small business and there are so many Asian American stories you can tell. You know, I think editors at different organizations just need to realize that it's not a niche thing. Let's not make Asian American story a niche thing. You know, it just like every other American story, you know, it can be stock market, it can be anything. And then secondly, I think we need to convince the public that Asian Americans are not just victims of hate crimes that you glance over in the breaking news report during your morning coffee. No, that's not what we are. And, you know, and you know, we're doing great on big screen and having more people having more visibility, but also let's not make Asian American story like just, oh, they're in Hollywood rom-com now, you know, they made it. Let's keep pushing, you know, let's not stop here. So, you know, we have, Asian Americans have like histories and stories to tell just like everybody else. So I think we need to make that point across to all of our bosses and the gatekeepers.
I think you might have been alluding to Crazy Rich Asians there at the end of your talk. So yeah, certainly just because Crazy Rich Asians came out doesn't mean Asian Americans have made it. So that's an excellent point. You know, thinking about the broader society and kind of the role that journalists and journalism plays within it. You know, Diana makes an excellent point that people aren't necessarily going to change, right? They're not motivated to change. Their own interests aren't served by changing, or at least they don't think they are. So, you know, if we can't change the newsroom, you know, and if it's not really actually our job to do that anyway, is there something that we do as journalists out there as part of a larger kind of Asian American movement to make change? And I don't know, I'm not trying to ask if you are an activist outside of your job, or even if you think journalism as activism. But the question is how to build and sustain a long-term movement of anti-Asian violence, against anti-Asian violence, across journalists, scholars, and community activists.
I was dying when she was talking about the Crazy Rich Asians because definitely, yes, representation is important, but that's only scratching the surface of what we're trying to accomplish. And so I guess keeping the movement alive, whatever you want to call it, standing up for yourself and standing up for others in the workplace. For example, I know Marianne mentioned that using your strikes, like for example, if you're like people know you as like the quiet Asian girl. I mean, people have known me as a quiet Asian girl, and then suddenly like I'm really like heated up about like something that's going on. They're like, oh wow, like she's really like maybe I should listen to what she has to say about that. I mean, regardless of however they see you or what they think you are like you should just stand up and speak your truth no matter what. So for example, like if my newsroom was like saying something completely factually incorrect about what was happening in the Atlanta shootings, or pronouncing the names wrong, and maybe I didn't want to step on any toes, but I just feel like it's really important to do that anyway, and maybe you could change your approach or something like that, but you still have to do it, and it might feel really scary. But yeah, I mean, also donating to the victims, donating to AAPI organizations, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Asian Americans Journalists Association. They do some really good work helping, the longevity of these groups, because these people are doing the work that we want. And, if you don't have time to volunteer for them or, donate, use your platform, share your personal stories, educate your non-Asian friends, and also have solidarity, with other people of color as well. So I know this is all super broad. There's just so many things that you can do, and keeping the movement alive is just an everyday thing. It's not like, what do I do? Like, it's just like the way that I live, the way that I do things. Like if I'm not on a story or anything, but I see something, going on in the street, like I will say something. And so just those everyday things.
Yeah, I think the hardest part about keeping something, maintaining that fight is burnout. And I think that we all need to support each other. Like like you see people with signs at rallies screaming, and you think that's what being radical or activism is. But like I want to say 80% of it is like the people who are standing on the sidelines handing out bottles of water, or like Kind bars, or the volunteers in the medical tent who are making sure the protesters are doing okay. The people who just say, hey, you're doing a good job, to give emotional support, validation, just continual reminders that what we're doing is important, and that you as a person matter. Because when you're doing this sort of work, you're going to get a ton of pushback by a lot of different people, and you're going to feel tired and want to give up all the time. And care is the most radical thing. Like, that's something that I want people to know, like I think I was at in a different city, and they had their gay pride weekend, and there was like a block party. It was awesome. And the DJ who was not Asian, he was wearing a t-shirt that said "Stop AAPI Hate" or something like that, and I just felt so nice. And I was like, oh my god, this is like, I feel supported by this person who has no reason, especially in that context, to like make that statement. And because he did that, I felt so good, just like walking around. Like, it made my weekend. And that's something that, like, if you're an ally, just signal that you care every single day. And that means probably more than like going to a protest once and then feeling like, oh, it's too much for me, I'm not gonna do anymore. Like, if you want to do a little bit every day, signal that you care a little bit every day.
And I guess, like, in terms of like long-term movement and how to carry it forward, I remember talking to China scholars and just professors when I was reporting on why there is anti-Asian sentiment. So I think something, they mentioned before, which I also agree, is that Asian American history needs to be taught or to be paid more attention to, in curriculum, whether it's in high school or in college. I think I don't even remember that I learned anything about Asian American when I was in school, in high school or college, actually, yeah, so I think that's something that is probably more urgent than other things. We need to, if we want to educate people more about our history, I think that need to be promoted more. And I think another thing is I've noticed that a lot of Asian Americans, especially the older generation, our parents' parents, a lot of them prefer to speak their mother tongue. So, with all these things going on in the English world, they're excluded. They don't know what's going on in our world. They don't read us, and we never reached out to them. And I've reported on like Chinese Trump supporters. Isn't that bizarre? There's quite a big community actually, and and also the parents who sued Harvard and Ivy League, because they're against affirmative action. I think the uncles and the aunties are ill-informed, and they're taken advantage of by somebody who's just trying to reach their goal. They're not trying to advance Asian American rights or Asian American communities. So I think we need to help identify who's the ally and who's trying to use them, and include the uncle and the aunties. And so I think as journalists, we need to be more inclusive of different Asian languages that are spoken here. I think in that way we can bring everybody together. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So we've had, that exhausts the questions that we had pre-prepared. Now, some of you audience members sent us questions before the panel, and so we want to honor those. And so I've kind of taken the liberty of rephrasing them to kind of make it easier to answer for the panelists. And the panelists don't all have to answer this one, so just if you want to. But the first question is, and I think it's a tough question, how can white women acknowledge their privilege and positionality when engaging with research participants from different ethnic, racial backgrounds, and/or investigating issues of privilege and oppression appropriately so as not to cause further harm during research? And I think this does have to do with what we were talking about earlier, these kind of racial microaggressions and the accumulative effects of such microaggressions. Sometimes you don't even know that you're creating a microaggression, or that you're aggressing in a racial way. And so this can be inadvertent, but it nevertheless can be hurtful or painful and may affect the research that you're doing. So does anyone have a thought about how someone doing research on, let's say, Asian Americans can work to kind of prevent or limit the amount of potential for a racial microaggression?
Oh, well, nobody's gonna go. I guess I'll go first. I think sincerity is really just what it comes down to, when you're dealing with interracial or whatever. I think nowadays we just need more of that and less of the, you're this one group and I'm this one group and I don't want to talk to you. So I think, if you're really trying to do research to them, I think it's also very important to communicate to the participants first that it is impossible for you to ever fully understand what they're going through, or you're going to try. And they're going to guide you through this process instead of the other way around. I think also tell them that, they can stop at any time if they feel uncomfortable, and they can talk to you about anything if they're uncomfortable. So I think, if you've done that in a very sincere manner, I think you'll be able to build good relationships with the community.
So I really like that. And I want to add a couple things. First, like I think the main thing that I've experienced is like, even if somebody is mindful of their privilege, like when they're actually confronted with said privilege or like a thing that they might be doing, that they'll still get really, really upset. So I would kind of just like do mindfulness meditation maybe, and just recognize that everybody does it. I do it to other people, I'm sure. And just like be mindful of your uh emotional reactions, and be aware that sometimes you might get feedback that you don't like, and that's okay. The other thing is, like, as a white woman researcher, you can, instead of like worrying about your privilege, like, because it's there, use it. There's a lot that a white woman researcher can say that we can't, so just use what you got and like fight the good fight, don't worry so much.
Yeah, so thanks for those two comments on that one. We also got another question before the panel from uh, an audience member contributor, and I've rephrased this one too to make it easier to answer. And it's a tough one, but I think an important one, especially given how many of the media images of attacks on Asian and Asian American are by other minority group members. So how do you address the fact that in media, anti-Asian violence is perpetrated by African Americans is overrepresented when we know that most violence against Asian Americans is done by white assailants? Does anyone want to take a shot at that one?
Focus on victims. You don't even need to say what race that the assailant is. It doesn't matter in a racially motivated crime. It's the victim's race that matters. So hammer that home. Also, if there's statistics that most assailants are white, report those statistics. Like the media is good at overrepresenting the number of other minorities and who attack Asians, and underrepresenting, like in terms of like actual stories, like the number of white assailants. So just hammer those statistics home. Focus on the victim first, and also like it's gonna happen. Oh, another thing is, did you know that in the LA riots, it was not even like Black rioters who were looting the Korean stores, and the media kept juxtaposing Korean rooftop Koreans, with Black protesters over and over again to sell that story. But it was actually like Latino immigrants. So it was an immigrant on immigrant conflict there. And the story then, and it remains now, is it was a Black on Asian conflict, because the media wants that racial tension so that the white assailants and the white systemic racism can get ignored. So don't let that happen. Another thing is, I have a friend who's a public defender in San Francisco, and she says that 9 out of 10 times when it's an Asian victim of violence and a Black assailant, the family and the victim will 9 out of 10 times ask for restorative justice. And 9 out of 10 times, if it's a white victim and a Black assailant, 9 out of 10 times that victim will request the maximum punishment. So report the stories that are factually accurate, that reflect what's it called? Restore, like unity and not conflicts, and report the actual statistics and hammer that home.
Yeah, I agree. Once you have the facts, no one can argue with you because you literally have the concrete numbers. And I thought that Diana made a really good point about how that causes racial tensions between Black and Asians, because then you're like focusing on the wrong thing. You're like not focusing on the white attacker. You're not focusing on the victims. You're just talking about, and I know that there is a lot of racism within the Asian American community, and I can speak on that like myself, like a lot of my relatives, they're like, oh yeah, like be careful, like when, and you know, that's something that also does need to be addressed. And I feel like a lot of Black and Asians, you know, there are creating more movements for solidarity between the two groups, and I think that that's really important as well. But yeah, a lot of media just reports that it's mostly, I mean, a lot, I was talking to my friend about this earlier, and we saw a lot of, in California, we saw a lot, I am originally from California, even though I worked in Idaho, but we saw in the news a lot that a lot of the attackers for Asian Americans were Black. And even though the statistics say that they're not the majority, it's been kind of like shown more, and then that has made people more angry. And I feel like, you know, that's really disproportionate. But there was also an article that came out on NBC that was refuting these. So there are people, like, you know, speaking out and being like, hey, you know, actually this is what's going on and that's not true. And so, you know, as journalists, maybe we could do more with that as well and speak out about that and use the numbers like Diana said. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate those two responses and the question as well, because I think there's a way in which, because we've been seeing so many pictures of possibly African American people doing violence against Asian Americans, there's a certain way that psychologically maybe readers can start to think that there's not attacks on African Americans, that there's not violence against African Americans, that there are no tensions from the Asian American side to African Americans, that there aren't, you know, cultural differences that matter within society, and that you know, it's not just a kind of simple answer of, oh, you know, Asian Americans are victims and African Americans are perpetrators or something like that, which would redeem some problematic racist stereotype against African Americans. So I appreciated the two complex responses, and I think the complex question, which really helps to kind of think through this moment. Now, that exhausts the questions that we got before the panel, but there's still one lingering question in the Q&A, and I thought I would just ask the question since it's sitting there for a while. And I don't know if any of you would like to comment on this or not, but Terry is wondering what the differences would be between like a traditional mainstream media news outlet like CNN, New York Times, et cetera, versus an ethnic media outlet, you know, an Asian American newspaper or an Asian American radio station or whatever, when covering the Asian population during COVID. Do you have any experiences or knowledge about how these two different kinds of news organizations and agencies might cover the same topic differently?
I guess I'll go first. I think I'm sure you guys have heard Next Shark is like an Asian American news outlet. So they have done great, awesome job covering all the anti-Asian violence that has been happening since the beginning of the pandemic. And I think the number one difference for me is how frequent they cover it. I think, you know, for traditional news outlets, you saw like one or two reports of rising hate crimes at the beginning, and then they didn't do anything till this year when it spiked up again and like more ferocious attacks happened, and then they did another report. But Next Shark, something like Asian American News Outlet, has been consistently reporting the cases that have been happening throughout the entire year. So I think that's a major difference. And I guess it comes back to earlier question that how do you keep it fresh, or how do you keep your editor convinced that we need to keep reporting on those things? So I guess that's a main difference for me.
I think there's a lot of blame China, like at least in the New York Times, every time I've seen a COVID story, there will be at least one mention of like, oh, our government is doing such a bad job of blah, blah, blah. But it's China's fault. But China did it first. There's always like a blame China blip everywhere. And I don't know if it's like specific to the US or something, but in other countries' reports, I don't see that as much. Yeah, and Bernadette's right. It's somehow a connection to communism or Confucianism even. It's just like, why? Like other reports just focus on the disease and the science and the epidemiology and just actually do reporting.
I think we're nearing the end of the panel. And so to conclude, what I'd like to do is ask the panelists if they have anything else they've been dying to say. Maybe we didn't ask a question and yet they have something they specifically wanted to say and wanted to let everyone know. So here's your chance, to give a kind of final comment. And then after they're done, I want to make just a couple of concluding comments, and then we'll adjourn. And I'll encourage you to write stories, tweet about the panel, look for the recorded version, which some of you are going to be watching right now, and to get the recorded version out on social media as well, so we can help inform all of our friends, family, and colleagues. So last question, panelists, is there anything final you'd like to say that related to this panel? Marianne.
I think the last thing I would say is that I remember having this conversation about covering anti-Asian hate with one of my editors who has been in this industry for decades. And he told me that he felt like, and he's talking to his bosses, and that the younger journalists are taking more of an activist stance nowadays on things. I think we're all taught that not to be too close to the story, or you got to be completely like just disconnected from it even. But I think nowadays is a bit different when it comes to things like this, like racism and anti-Asian violence. I think if the journalists are not pushing this, then what are the chances that the community can get a word out? So I think I disagree with my editor and good friend's point that it might be too much of an activist stance for journalists to talk about this. I think I think it's justified for us to do it, because who else would if we are backing off from this topic? And I think that's my final word. If you're Asian American, you're thinking about going to journalism, do it. Your parents might say you're not going to make money. You're not, but you're doing important work. And eventually maybe you can get to you live comfortably. You're not making billions, millions, but going to the industry, don't be afraid. So and if you're already in the industry, don't give up, and find your support system. And I think we're all here, reach out to us, reach out to anyone on panel, anyone in the group. And I think we'll push forward together.
Yeah, I just also wanted to add, thank you so much, everyone, for putting this together, inviting us, and asking such intelligent questions, and caring so much, and just approaching everything with such empathy and compassion. I think that, you know, it's hard for us to come up here and talk about these things, but it's also hard for some people like you guys to digest all this information as well. And I think that that's really amazing that you guys are taking the steps, especially if that doesn't happen, like these issues don't affect you, but you want to step outside of that box and know that this is important to us and important to news in general in the society. And just don't forget that, you know, you guys are doing a really good thing as well. So.
Yeah, my final comment is if you're a journalist, or even if you're not, if you just like writing, you know, you have the skill to tell the story the way that you want. And it doesn't matter if your boss right now says no, because that's just a blip in time. In 2 years, they might not be your boss. In 2 years, maybe you're the boss somewhere else. But just don't give up the story that you want to tell, and don't take no for an answer. You know, if you don't want, if somebody says no, go to somebody else. You know, like, why is your boss now the end all be all? That person can, I won't say, but you know what I'm thinking. You know, like, if you're not being invited to the table, create your own table. Like, there's 3 of us right now. We could create a table right now. We could create an outlet. Why not? You know, like, if enough of us are saying things and doing things and speaking out, like, people are going to notice at some point. There's going to be some quorum event where they can't ignore us anymore.
Thank you for those rich concluding comments. I just have a couple of comments to add, just to help us conclude and to end the session. My thanks go out to all of the attendees, to everyone who helped put this together, to the representatives of AEJMC and NCA, and especially to our wonderful panelists who have given important time, I think, to help us think through these issues. One of the consistent themes of the answers as well as the questions has to do with how do we cover or address Asian Americans and Asian American violence. We know the violence is happening. We want people to be aware of it, and we want to potentially protest or resist or challenge that racism. To do that, we have to take a step. We have to have the courage to meet Asian Americans, to meet Asian people, even if they do or don't speak the same language as we do. We have to cultivate an interest in Asian and Asian American people. We need to be willing to and be able to cross that line, no matter whether we're a researcher, a journalist, or just an ordinary person. To cultivate an interest in Asian and Asian American people requires looking for stories about Asian and Asian American people, reading histories about Asian and Asian American people, and trying food of Asian and Asian American people, in addition to all other kinds of cultural aspects of Asian and Asian American experiences. By doing this, we will be more informed. And part of what I heard the panelists say over and over is work to be informed. If you are already informed, inform others. Share with others what you learn. And by doing this, we can have a larger social, political, and cultural impact on society. And so it does go beyond writing stories, but stories are a really excellent way to help draw attention, to help inform and educate, and to help change perspectives that people have out there. And as people who write stories, I think we can do a lot, and we can definitely all do better. So with that, I want to thank you for attending and appreciate all of your energy and kind thoughts. And we look forward to more information about Asian and Asian American journalists and researchers. And so please look for additional panels by NCA, AEJMC, and Allied Communication professional organizations. With that, please have a wonderful end of the week, and thank you for coming.